So we have been in Joshua now for 3 weeks. My first week, but we've been in it for 3 weeks. And it's a great time for God's people, but especially in these first few chapters, it is a trying time. Just massive change, transition and change, and they can see turbulence and obstacles on the horizon as many battles need to be fought to claim what God has promised them. Transition of leadership. Moses is dead and he's gone, and you can imagine just what are we going to do now kind of questions that are being asked, and is Joshua up to the task and all of this? And I'm just reminded in chapter 1 by what the text says, that Moses, he's dead. But the God of Moses is not dead. Moses is gone, but the God of Moses hasn't gone anywhere. And so we see the story develop in the pages in this great drama in the book of Joshua, which is a history book about this part of the world that's still being fought over in headlines and news today. And I was thinking this week about parallels, which is the turbulence of flying. If you'll go with me for a second, if you've flown much, you know what it's like to be in some bumpy air, to experience turbulence. Maybe just the plane is shaking a little bit, or maybe it's up and down, kind of like a roller coaster, and it can be really scary, especially if you have not flown much. And there was a story that I came across recently. Molly Lee was a passenger on this flight, and she witnessed this whole thing. And so she talks about this as she saw another passenger on this flight from Charlotte to New York who was very anxious, terrified of flying. And actually, it wasn't until she began to actually cry, they were still on the ground, and she started crying, that a flight attendant overheard the commotion and got involved. Immediately went to her side and began to comfort her, began to help her with her anxiety. And I think we have a picture of this happening in real time as he's kneeling there by her seat, holding her hand and saying words of encouragement to her. And so we've got this firsthand account that's given from Molly, this passenger. She said he was just so reassuring, so calming. He said, "You know what? I got you. I'm going to be there for you. Just anything you need, let me know." And with every little noise, she would be like, "What's that?" And he was, that's just the jet bridge pulling away from the airplane. Anything that happened, he was just calming her, and he really helped her. Didn't have to do that, she said. And to see someone extend their heart in a way to a stranger was just beautiful to me, and I wanted to capture it. And so she wrote it down, and then this picture went viral on the internet as people celebrated Floyd Dean Shannon, the flight attendant. And this picture is as he's spending about 10 minutes reassuring this distraught passenger, telling her she's safe, it's going to be okay. And so as we go through the book of Joshua on Sunday mornings, we've got Israel in transit. And this is going to be a bumpy flight. There are enemies, there are obstacles that they will surely face, but God is taking them from point A to point B, and point B is the promised land that He promised Abraham centuries before. This land will belong to you and your descendants. And so they're making this trek from slavery back in Egypt through wilderness wanderings now to this new frontier of their forever home in Israel. And yes, it is going to be a difficult journey. It is not going to be easy. And so as I think about their journey, I think about me, I think about you. What about us? I mean, there really is no risk-free way to get from point A to point B, at least if that destination is worth anything. I mean, it's going to be bumpy. There are going to be setbacks. Everything is not going to go exactly according to plan. And to have a God who is with us, who is reassuring us, who's holding our hand, fills me with joy and peace to know that God is here Thank you, Father, for that. And from time to time, between that old life and that new life, there is going to be turbulence. And so we get today to witness one of the biggest moments in the history of God's people as they move across the Jordan River from the east side to the west side into the land of Israel. And they're going to make this crossing. And this morning in Joshua 3 is going to be the moment that Israel becomes a nation. Wait, they're not a nation. No, they weren't a nation until now. They were a people. Now they're going to be a nation because nations, my friends, they have borders, and they've never had borders. They've never had, this is our land, until they step across the Jordan River and move into the promise of God. So we get to see this morning, we get to see what it's like to hold God's hand through moments of change and transition and challenge, and we get to see the importance of faith, trusting God in these inflection moments of life where we have to take that step and believe that God is with us. So Joshua chapter 3, the scene is painted for us, verses 2 to 5. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp, and they commanded the people, as soon as you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, as soon as you see that ark being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place to follow it. Yet there shall be a distance between you and it, between you and the ark, about 2,000 cubits, about a half of a mile. Do not come near it, in order that you may know the way you shall go. Keep your eyes on it, that you shall know the way that you shall go, for you have not passed this way before. You've never been in this land before. You've never made this crossing before across the Jordan. So Joshua, then he said to the people, I love this. He said, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Wow. Not wonders over there somewhere with this other group of people. Not wonders like your ancestors experienced. No. The Lord, consecrate yourselves, because the Lord is going to do wonders among you tomorrow. Wow. So, goosebumps there. As best we can, we want to put ourselves in their shoes this morning. We are standing on the banks of the Jordan. We're on the wrong side. We're on the east side. But we can see it, right? It's right over there. The promised land, our future, where our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and future generations will worship the Lord and will build their lives. And so for years, though, we have heard people around us question this destiny. We have heard people around us discuss, maybe it's a better idea if we don't cross. We've heard people maybe in secret behind tent flaps or out in public around a campfire discuss, how about we go back to Egypt? How about we just turn around? It looks really difficult over there. At least we knew we had 3 squares and we knew what life was back. And then why don't we go back that way? Go back to slavery. People were actually putting that out there as an idea. That's a crazy brainstorming session right there. How about we try slavery again, you know? But here we are on the frontier, on the banks of the Jordan, and finally, we, our people, are ready to let go of the fear, to push the doubt into the background that's held us back for decades. And we're ready to take that step of faith and move across, following God, into this promised land. The future is there on the other side. Now, God's not going to beam us over there. I mean, we got the Jordan River, and we're told in the text it is at flood stage, okay? Never is the Jordan River like, let's say, the Mississippi. It's not like that kind of river, but flood stage, you're talking about 300 feet across, probably about 30 feet deep, so a significant obstacle. There is no bridge. There is no armada of boats, of ferries to just take all of the people across. So how do we get hundreds of thousands of people from the east side over to the west side? How do we get over there? And there's this promise God is going to have to make it happen. He's going to do wonders among us tomorrow. And no doubt at that point the story has to pass through the camp that evening. Remember what God did? When our ancestors, it wasn't that long ago, were standing on the wrong side of the Red Sea. And remember how Pharaoh and his chariots and his army were pressing them up against the Red Sea and were about to slaughter them. And God opened a way. And we, our people, we went across the Red Sea. And then God covered up our enemies with the waters after we had crossed. This is going to be our moment tomorrow. But this time it's going to be a little bit different because you see, God is not just going to open the water and we all go across. This time it's going to be a little bit different in a significant and important way. The leaders of God's people will actually have to step into the water. Right? It's not going to stop until they step over into the waters of the Jordan. It's going to require, quite literally, a step of faith. And so Joshua's like, this is what's going to happen. Leaders of Israel, I need for you to go. I need for you to take that ark that represents the presence and the protection of God. And I need for you to believe in the promise of God and take that step. So much depends on it. It will be the moment of truth tomorrow. And each of us, look, we face these. We know the situation. It's like this. You know what you need to do, but you're apprehensive. You know the path forward, but you're afraid to take the step. You don't know what's on the other side of that. You don't know what obstacles will be there, and so you hesitate. In this case, the hesitation was decades of, yeah, that's the promised land over there, but And so this time they chose to step into the waters, and immediately something upstream like an invisible Hoover Dam just began to stack the water up higher and higher. And they were able to walk across, all of them, old, young, men, women, everybody walking across the Jordan River. The Jordan River bed, I guess you could say. Hours and hours passed for this crossing to be accomplished. And right here we have, I think, a pretty significant spiritual lesson for us, life lesson for us. And here it is. Often, the hardest step is the first step. The others will start to follow. Once we take the step, once we see that God is with us, the other steps follow, but that first one, it can feel like a doozy, you know. And so they stepped in the water. The miracle happened for them. And I was thinking, as I was writing the message, I was thinking about that time I popped the question to Isla. I bet a lot of the guys here will identify with this. I was so nervous. I mean, my skin got cold and clammy. I think my hairs were standing on end. I was so nervous. And I wasn't nervous. It wasn't like, is she going to say yes or no? I mean, we had talked about our love for each other. We had talked about our future together. We'd even made certain, like, wedding plans. It wasn't like, this is a coin flip. I don't know if Isla's going to say yes or no. It was like I understood, once I take this step, there is no going back. This is so big. This is the rest of our lives. This is me and her facing all kinds of challenges, financial challenges, spiritual challenges, relationship challenges. This is us having a family together. This is us maybe someday, not right now, but when the time is right. Grandkids, we're holding them in our rocking chairs together. This is a big, big deal. And that's the way these decisions can be sometimes. You know it's the right decision. You know what you need to do, but still you can hesitate because it's just so big. I mean, that step of of going off to college. Or that step of starting that business. You have to leverage all of your assets and put them into that new business idea. Maybe take out a loan, put up the collateral, find investors. It's a big, big step. That step of saying yes to Jesus. And on the other side of that is the rest of your life and eternity for that matter. It is a big step, or that step of being baptized into Jesus. And you know what you need to do, but you're not quite ready for whatever reason to take the step to get your feet wet. The step of committing to be part of a local church. I mean, maybe you've been visiting here or somewhere else for a long time, but to plant your flag and say, these are my people, that's a big step. And so we hesitate and we don't take the step sometimes. Saying yes to a ministry, saying yes to helping out with the youth ministry at Prestoncrest or teach 6-year-olds or something, you're like, I feel called to do that, but the step of tithing for the very first time and saying, this year, maybe it's 2024, honey, we're going to give at least 10% of everything we make to the local church, to God's work there. Maybe that feels like a big step and you're just, first step. It's a big one. Before you step off, you will have to hear the voices in your head telling you, I don't know about the timing. I think it's going to be better later. Or the voices that say, you're not ready. Or someone else will step in and do that. You don't have to do that. Someone else will take care of that. The voices that say, think of all of the things that could go wrong. And there's always, with big things, with important things, there's always a laundry list of things that can go wrong. And if you listen to those voices, you know where I'm going, right? If you listen to those voices, you stay where you are. You never take the step. The Lord will do wonders, but you have to take the step. And when the step is the right one, not only will you rejoice in it and be glad in it and see the Lord surrounding you with His presence and His provision as you walk forward in that, not only will it bless you and change the trajectory of your life, but it will inevitably affect countless other people, even future generations. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So it's not just about you and your hesitation and your unwillingness or willingness to take a step. It's about everyone who will be affected by that step. I was thinking this week about Israel. So they're set free from Egypt. The plagues occur and this miraculous deliverance happens. They are set free from Egypt. And instead of trusting God and going into the promised land, you remember they kind of wandered around. They let their fears and doubts get the best of them. And so I got on Google Maps this week. And I was thinking, it doesn't look that far from Egypt to Israel. Have you ever thought that? It doesn't look that far. So I went, okay, let's plot. How long would it take to walk from Suez, Egypt, up to a town? I don't remember the name of it. Let's put the chart of, so Mizpah, Ramon, that's in Israel. How long would it take to walk that? Can you see that up there? 6 hours, 9 minutes by car, 4-day walk. 4-day walk. And I thought for good measure, because, there might be parts of that area that you might want to avoid. I don't know. Maybe a 6-day walk. If you took 4, if you took a direct route, 6, if you kind of skirted around some areas there. But not that far. Long story short, Israel would take 40 years. 40 years. So instead of 6 days, let's see, I calculated this, 14,600 days. Hesitation. A generation passes away. None of them eat the fruit of the promised land. None of them enjoy a new home in the because they hesitated and they doubted. So you get to Joshua 3, God's people, they do start crossing over. They're ready to take the step. and 40 years earlier, they hadn't been. And so they're just wandering around. 40 years before God said go, they said no. 40 years before, the 12 spies went out to kind of do this intelligence report on the land. And it is good. It's flowing with milk and honey. It's amazing. But the enemies over there are so strong. They look like giants. They have walled cities. There is no way we can take it. Now, Joshua was in the minority report along with a guy named Caleb, and he said, we can take it. Let's go. God is with us. But the voice of the 10, the majority, won out. And they didn't take the step. And they wandered and they wandered and they wandered. So Joshua 3 demonstrates for us faith is a verb. Faith is a verb. I don't know that those people in that previous generation who doubted, I don't know that you could say they didn't believe in God. I mean, I think they worshiped. They prayed together. They had the tabernacle with them. God was giving them directions and orientation. Like they believed in God, but did they believe in God? The Greek word is pistis, which is more than belief. It is trust. It's a relational kind of belief where you follow, where your actions line up with what you say you believe. And so we've got this taking of the step in Joshua 3. We've got this trust in God. We're going to follow God into our promised land. And so once they've all crossed over, I like this part of the story. We kind of forget about this part of the story sometimes. But once they had all crossed over, God said, I need you to do something. And here it was. Leaders of the tribes needed to go back into the middle of the river, still dry, okay? Water still piling up there. I need you to go back in the middle of the riverbed. And I want you to grab the biggest rocks you can. I mean, maybe 2 or 3 guys had to haul these rocks over, or 10 guys or something. And we're going to come back over on this new side where we're our new home over here, and we're going to build a monument. Why? Because God knows us. And He knows He can do a wonder today, something incredible today, and in a few years or in a generation, we easily forget. It just becomes a story. It becomes a legend. No, you're going to build this pile of rocks, and when your kids and grandkids see this, and they're like, what's this pile of rocks doing? Let me tell you the story. Those rocks came from the middle of that river. It was dry, yeah. God stopped the water, and we came across, and we moved into this land. And guys, it's important. When you see God do something big, something little, something medium-sized, when you see God do, celebrate that. Mark that. Invite people over to dinner. I don't know, put a pile of rocks in your yard. Do whatever you got to do to remember that, to celebrate that, to tell it and retell it, so that future generations will not forget what God did in your life. No way around it. If you want a relationship with Jesus, if you want to go deeper with the Lord, if you want to be a disciple of Jesus, if your heart's desire is to honor God with your life, you have to walk by faith, not by sight. It's not that you don't see things. It's not that you don't see the obstacles. It's not that you don't understand what you're up against, but you walk by faith. You choose to take steps believing in God, not in the obstacles. And so as Paul famously said there in 2 Corinthians 5:7, we walk by faith, not by sight. Affirm that with me, if you would, out loud. We walk by faith, not by sight. I hope that's true of us as a church. I hope that's true of you. We walk by faith, not by sight. So 40 years before, they didn't put their feet in the Jordan. They chose to walk by sight. Sight of the walled cities. Sight of the giants who lived in the walled cities. That's what they saw. And so they remained in the wilderness. And then finally, years later, they chose to put their faith in God. Joshua 3, verse 17. The priest bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on, I love that, dry ground in the midst of the Jordan. And all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. Something that's happened after Isla and I left Brazil. We planted a church there, spent 10 years. There wasn't a church in this neighborhood. We planted a church. It's going great. Praise God. But one of the things that we've noticed is God has started this thing there. It's a deaf ministry. There are hearing impaired adults at the church, 60 of them. They'll have their own worship services sometimes, and then other times they're worshiping with the whole church. And it is a beautiful thing to see. This amazing group of deaf adults. They've hosted national congresses. They had one like a couple of weeks ago. They had an international one with people from Korea, Japan, deaf believers who came from all over the world, and they had this big, so it's turned into this big thing there at this church, and it's amazing to see. And Jefferson, the preacher there, my friend Jefferson, he's always posting videos. I mean, there was one a couple of months ago of, I think it was 4 deaf people who were in a baptistry, who were giving their lives to Christ, and the confession is taken in Libras. It's not like American signs, but it's a little different down there. And they were confessing their faith, and they were applauding God and everything. That's how they applaud down there, the deaf folks. And then a couple weeks ago, there was another video. It was 3 adults giving their lives to Christ, be baptized into Christ. And here's the thing: Isla and I didn't start this ministry. Like, I don't remember any deaf members of the church when we were there. And I'm watching this, and I am thinking, what if we had not taken the step? What if we had looked at all of the challenges and obstacles of moving our young family from North America to Brazil, South America? What if we had not gone? What if we had not planted the church? What if we had not reached Jefferson and others? How many people wouldn't have heard the gospel? How many people wouldn't have given their lives to Christ? You don't know the impact of your hesitation, of your pause, of your holding pattern where you don't take a step and you don't trust the Lord, because it's not just you. How many people will be blessed in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years because of the step of faith that you took? How many people will be unblessed because you didn't? It's real talk. Just real talk. And so I wonder what it is today that you feel led to do. It may be something for a few days or a few weeks or a few years. You know what you need to do. The Spirit has been trying to push you, but He never shoves us. I mean, He can nudge, but you've got to choose to say, yes, God, and take the step. What is that place in your family or in your spiritual journey or in your business or in your ministry where you know the step you need to take, but you're still circling the tower? You're not going to land the plane. You're not going to take the step, or you haven't up to this point. I wonder what that step is. And why not take the step today? Really? Why not take it today? Why not take it this week? Or maybe, and I think about that flight attendant, Floyd. Maybe you know someone, you love someone that's hesitating, that needs to take a step. And maybe the Spirit of God is calling you to come up beside him, take a knee, hold them by the hand and reassure them so that they can have the courage to trust the Lord. Maybe that's what you need to do.